Got all our jurors. All right, Ms. Rivers, are you ready? We are back on the record in State versus Blige and Head. Happy Friday, everyone. Mr. Abate, I did get the 7 calls at your usual delivery time of I'm asleep and you're not. So I listened to them hurriedly this morning after I did a few other things. We'll need to talk about them as a group, maybe during the morning break. They're not, I'm assuming the parts you're going to play aren't long. I think all told, it's lots of minutes, but your email was helpful in guiding me to the areas of interest that you have. But I do think that we'll need to have a discussion about them before they're played. Were they going to be played through one of the first couple witnesses? Okay. If you're moving faster than forecast and we're getting to a witness through whom you seek to play them and we haven't had our morning break, let me know and we'll take the morning break before that witness. Okay. Anything, Mr. Abate, we need to talk about before we bring the jury in and you call your next witness? Mr. King?
No, Judge.
Okay. And you weren't in the accident. You encountered an accident which slowed you down.
That's right.
Got it. Well, I'm sorry for the other folks. Ms. Fagan, good morning.
Good morning.
Anything we need to cover on behalf of Mr. Blige? All right, let's bring the jury in, please.
Your Honor, Mr. Rao will be taking the next witness.
I'll ask him who it is when the jury's in here. He's on a streak. Can you, one of you two, please click on the podium computer that got it so that it comes off the big screen? Thank you. Great work.
That's right.
All rise for the jury.
You all can be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday. Glad everyone made it in safely today. No incidents. You guys get a gold star for rotating your seats. That's good. Appreciate you doing that. We're going to pick up with the state's presentation in just a minute. But I appreciate everyone continuing to be on time so that we can get started when we need to. As usual, when you get here, we're in the midst of doing something else, but we've wrapped up the things we needed to talk about. And we are ready to hear from the state's next witness. Mr. Rao?
Judge, state calls the firearm examiner, Catherine Jordan.
Ms. Jordan?
My name is Catherine Jordan, CATHERINE, JORDAN.
Good morning, Ms. Jordan.
Good morning.
Can you tell me the jury where you're currently?
Hold on one sec. Also, good morning. If you're comfortable, Ms. Jordan, with it, it has helped us as we've worked through this trial to have the witness remove the mask. So if you're not comfortable doing that, it's not a requirement, but it is a polite request. Great, thank you.
Ms. Jordan, can you tell the jury where you're currently employed?
I'm employed by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation as a firearm and toolmark examiner. I work out of one of the regional crime labs located in Columbus, Georgia.
And how long have you been a firearms examiner?
Was employed by the GBI June 1st, 2005.
And what are the job duties of the firearms examiner within the GBI?
On a typical day, we take evidence such as bullets or cartridge cases from crime scenes or from autopsy, and we determine the caliber of those bullets or those cartridge cases. Then if there are more than one bullet or more than one cartridge cases, we compare those items to each other. So bullets to bullets, cartridge cases to cartridge cases, to determine if they were fired from the same firearm. And then also sometimes we're given firearms and asked if those firearms were responsible for having fired those bullets and or those cartridge cases. Additionally, we do testing to determine the distance that the muzzle of the firearm was from the target when the gun was fired. We also do ejection patterns, which would give us an idea of where ejected cartridge cases from a semi-automatic pistol would land once they had been ejected from a firearm. We do serial number restorations and also a process called toolmark examination.
What sort of educational background do you have and experience in that field to qualify you as a firearms examiner?
I have a BS in chemical engineering from Georgia Tech. I also have a BS in chemistry from Georgia Southwestern State University. In addition to that, I had 18 months of formal training at GBI headquarters in Decatur, Georgia, in the specific area of firearms examination. And during that time, we learned to determine caliber, determine the types of weapons that bullets and cartridge cases will be fired from, to compare them to each other, and to do all of those other testing that I mentioned earlier.
And how many times would you say you've examined evidence as it pertains to firearms evidence?
In a general year, we work around 150 cases, sometimes more, sometimes less. Each of those cases are different. Each of them may have several items of evidence and may take a while, or also those cases could contain only one item. So to tell you an exact number of how many things that I have examined, I couldn't give you an accurate count. I could tell you that during training, I examined over 500 different firearms. I checked the functionality of those firearms. I also test fired them, compared the bullets to each other that came from those weapons, compared the cartridge cases. So I've compared and examined multiple items of evidence in my time.
And have you testified as an expert witness before in the field of firearms examination?
Yes, sir, I have.
How many times?
I haven't also kept an accurate count of that. I can tell you it's 58 counties throughout the state of Georgia, also Broward County, Florida, and some Article 32 hearings for the United States Air Force. So I would say it's probably been well over 200, 250 times.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would tender Ms. Jordan as an expert in the field of firearms analysis.
No objection.
No objection.
Ms. Jordan, you are qualified for the purposes of this trial as an expert in the field of firearms analysis. You're welcome.
Ms. Jordan, with respect to the difference between a revolver and a semi-automatic handgun, would you mind explaining the difference between those two things for the members of the jury who might not know?
Yes, sir. Both firearms are firearms that are designed to be fired from the hand. Some firearms are designed to be fired from the shoulder, but when we call a firearm a pistol or a revolver, we're talking about guns designed to be fired from the hand. However, they are different. For a revolver, you have a cylinder which is taken from the frame of the firearm. This cylinder contains multiple chambers. This is where you load your unfired cartridges into the cylinder. The cylinder is then locked back into the frame of the revolver, and that cylinder will then rotate about a central axis about that barrel, basically. And so cocking the hammer in either single or double action, it causes the cylinder to rotate. It prepares the unfired cartridge to be prepared to be fired. And so when the hammer falls forward, whether it's because of a single action trigger pull or double action trigger pull, the hammer falls forward and it strikes the primer. that causes the detonation. That detonation then causes the gunpowder within the cartridge to begin combusting. That builds up a large amount of pressure and it causes the bullet to be pushed from the mouth of the cartridge case and down the barrel of the gun. And this can be repeated each time until every cartridge in that cylinder has been fired. And then once all of those have been fired, then that cylinder must be removed and those cartridge cases then can be extracted and ejected from the cylinder. Now for a semi-automatic pistol, you have what is called a magazine. A magazine is just a box basically that holds cartridges. And so you would load unfired cartridges into this magazine, and then the magazine is placed into the magazine well of the firearm. To load a cartridge from this magazine, the slide is pulled rearward on that pistol. On the rearward pull of that slide, it causes the firing pin to be cocked. And then when that slide travels back forward, it pushes a cartridge from the magazine into the chamber of the firearm. And so this firing pin is ready to go forward once the trigger is pulled. So pulling the trigger causes the firing pin to go forward. Again, it strikes the primer, it detonates. It then causes the gunpowder to combust, and it pushes, because of the pressure, it pushes the bullet from the muzzle, or it pushes the bullet from the mouth of the cartridge case down the barrel of the firearm. But in turn, it also pushes that cartridge case rearward against the slide, and it causes that slide to begin opening. But then you also have two tools within that gun. One is called an extractor, the other is called an ejector. And its jobs are, number one, the extractor to pull that fired cartridge case from the chamber of the firearm. And then that second tool, the ejector, its job is to stand in place so that when that cartridge case is pulled against it, it causes that cartridge case to be ejected from the firearm.
So you've used the term cartridge. What specifically is comprised within the term cartridge?
When I refer to an item of ammunition as a cartridge, that means it's the unfired ammunition component. So a cartridge contains a cartridge case, an unfired primer, gunpowder within the cartridge case itself, and then a bullet that is seated in the mouth of the cartridge case.
So when a semi-automatic firearm discharges a cartridge, what is specifically discharged out of the firearm?
When a semi-automatic has been fired and it pulls that fired cartridge case from the chamber of the gun and causes it to eject, what you have ejecting from that ejection port is the cartridge case and a primer that has been struck by the firing pin.
Is cartridge case synonymous with shell casing?
Yes, sir, that would be a layman's term for a cartridge case.
Now, what sort of testing do you perform in order to determine whether multiple shell casings were fired from the same firearm?
The first thing that I do is I examine each of those cartridge case, and the first job is to determine their caliber. So this is one class characteristic that I'm examining for. A class characteristic on a cartridge case is going to be, first of all, its caliber, but then it's going to be the shape of that firing pin impression from when the firing pin struck the primer. It's going to leave an impression that's going to have a specific shape. And then also when that cartridge case fired and it slammed into that slide, it also received an impression at that point. Based on the design characteristics of that impression, that's another characteristic that I'm examining for. And then again, back to that extractor and that ejector, I'm looking for the tool marks that the extractor left on the cartridge case when it pulled the cartridge case from the chamber. And I'm also looking to see where the ejector struck that cartridge case. So based on all of these class characteristics, I start ruling out groups that could be included and then begin ruling groups that could be included. So if all of my cartridge cases share the same class characteristic, then I can start looking to see if they have been fired from the same firearm. If they don't share those class characteristics, then they're from different firearms. So then after, say if we have a group that has all the same class characteristics, then I'm looking for what is called an individual characteristic. And you can think of an individual characteristic basically as the gun's fingerprint. And you're probably thinking, how does the gun have a fingerprint? Well, when a firearm is being manufactured, it goes through several different manufacturing processes. During that manufacture, not intentionally, but sometimes that manufacturing process will leave behind nicks and burrs and scratches on the interior surface of that firearm that makes that firearm unique. And so when a bullet or cartridge case is fired in that gun, those imperfections impart imperfections onto that ammunition component. And so I'm looking for these imperfections under what is called a comparison microscope. Comparison microscope is just two microscopes. They're connected by one optical bridge, and it allows me to view two objects at the same time, same lighting and same magnification. So it's as if I'm putting the two items side by side. And I'm looking again for those individual characteristics. If they share the same individual characteristics, I can say that they were fired from the same firearm. If those individual characteristics are different, they're from different firearms.
So would it be fair to say for the jury that each firearm has a barrel that is unique such that it allows you to identify whether or not shell casings or projectiles were fired from a particular firearm?
For the barrel, we're going to be specifically talking about the bullets. For cartridge cases, we're talking about areas of the firearm such as the breech of the gun and the firing pin.
Now, is there testing and analysis that you can perform to determine whether or not multiple projectiles were fired from the same firearm?
Yes, sir. It will be the same process as I conduct with a cartridge case. I'm again placing these bullets under a comparison microscope, and I'm looking for the imperfections that were left on those bullets when they were fired down the barrel of the firearm.
Is there testing that you can perform to determine whether or not shell casings and projectiles were fired from a firearm that was recovered from a scene?
If I receive a firearm from the scene and it indeed turns out to be the gun that fired the bullet or the cartridge case, that's all I can say is that this firearm fired this bullet and this gun fired this cartridge case. I don't put the two items back together again.
If you did not receive a firearm in a case that you were asked to examine, you would not have a way of determining whether or not particular shell casings and firearm, or particular shell casings and particular projectiles were fired from the same firearm. Is that correct?
Nothing other than consistency in ammunition. And again, that's not to say that one was once a complete package.
Now, in turning your attention to DOFS number 2019-1021288, were you asked to perform testing in that case?
Yes, sir, I was.
And for the jury's edification, when I said DOFS number, would you mind explaining what that is?
DOPS number is just short for DOFS, and that just means Division of Forensic Science. That's a division of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. So basically, it's the state's lab.
And the number that I identified associated with the DOFS number in this case, is that one that is unique to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation?
The number that he gave you was the crime lab number. So when an item of evidence comes into the crime lab, it comes in a sealed container, and it's also supplied with a submission form. That submission form details the agency case numbers, and sometimes suspects or victims' names. So details of the case, and then the request for the item of evidence. Additionally, that evidence will come in sealed, but it will also contain that information. So the agency that's submitting it and their case number. When all of these things are fulfilled, then a lab technician will take it from a lockbox, take it to his or her computer, again, go over that information, make sure it's all there. And when it's deemed that everything is there, then it goes into our system, which is called LIMS. And that, again, is just an acronym, LIMS. It means Lab Information Management System. And this system helps us to maintain a chain of custody for that item, in that when that item comes to the desk and they've checked the information, they take a picture of that item, they put the submission form into the lab information management system with that image, and then it also receives a barcode with that case number. So now we have a crime lab case number that accompanies that item throughout the lab.
And did you make any particular findings as it relates to the case number that I cited?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you generate a report?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to approach you with what's been pre-marked for identification purposes as States Exhibit 172. Jordan, do you recognize States 172?
Yes, sir.
How do you recognize that document?
State Exhibit 172 has the case number that we're talking about today, but it also contains my signature and the findings from my examination.
And is that a true and correct copy of the report that you generated?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will move States Exhibit 172 and 172A, which is a digital copy of States 172.
All right, Ms. Fagan, any objection to states 172 or 172A? Mr. King,
No objection.
they're admitted.
So as it relates to States 172A, what items of evidence were you asked to perform or testing on?
I was asked to perform an examination on 2 items of evidence from autopsy and then cartridge cases from a crime scene. And so this on State Exhibit 172A, the digital copy, the 2 items of evidence from autopsy are going to be labeled items 2A and 2B. And then cartridge cases from crime scene are items 4A and 4B. And you'll see those item numbers on the left-hand side of that report.
So items 2A and 2B were received from the medical examiner's office. Is that correct?
They were taken from medical examiner's office, and then Fulton County DA's office took them into custody and then brought them back to the crime lab for examination.
And you indicated items 4A and 4B were from a separate group of evidence.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to approach you with what's been pre-marked for identification purposes as States Exhibits 131 and 171.
Hold on.
Admitted, right?
Yeah, so not they're in. So 171 and 131 already in evidence.
So States Exhibit 171, those are the projectiles from the medical examiner's office that you performed testing on. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And were you able to determine the caliber of those projectiles?
Yes, sir. States Exhibit 171 contained 2 different bullets. One was a .45 caliber bullet. The second was a .380 bullet.
The States Exhibit 171, I believe specifically item 2A, which would have been the .45 caliber projectile or bullet. Were you able to perform any testing on that?
Yes, sir. I examined this bullet, first of all, for its caliber. Its caliber was based on the weight of that bullet, also the overall design of that bullet, and the diameter of the base of the bullet. And this is how I determined the caliber. I also examined it under my comparison microscope, looking for those class characteristics. So I was looking for the rifling that was impressed on the side of this bullet. The barrel that this bullet traveled down did not leave specific characteristics. It looked like maybe it had been worn, or it did not engage the bullet very well. And so as for class characteristics to be determined as per the rifling, there was not enough information there. So just knowing that I had a .45 caliber bullet and I couldn't determine the rifling characteristics on that bullet, I couldn't give you a weapon type for that bullet.
Is it possible that the damage sustained by a projectile as it's making contact with objects, could that affect your ability to test for whether or not there were individual characteristics that could relate to a particular firearm?
It can, but not in this circumstance.
Why do you say that?
It can, but not in this circumstance. It wasn't due to damage.
But why do you, I didn't say, I'm sorry. Why do you say not? What about these circumstances make you say that?
There are circumstances where the bullet may strike something and may damage the bullet. And because of the damage to the bullet, I cannot determine what the characteristics of the rifling are. But in this circumstance, the bullet did not engage the rifling of the barrel. And so it didn't leave anything measurable for me to determine what the characteristics were.
With respect to items or item 2B, the .380 projectile that you received from the medical examiner's office, what sort of testing did you perform on that?
Again, I examined the bullet for its caliber. So based on its weight, overall design, and the diameter of the bullet, I could determine that it was a .380 bullet. And then again, I placed it on my comparison microscope and I examined it for its class characteristics. So this was going to be the number of lands and grooves that were impressed into the side of the bullets, the widths of those landing grooves, and then whether those lands and grows twist to the left or to the right. Based on these class characteristics, I'm going to rule out firearms that did not share those characteristics. And then I would include firearms that did share those same class characteristics. And in this circumstance, some of the firearms that would be consistent with having fired that bullet would be a Davis Industries or a Cobra 380 pistol.
Now, in turning your attention to items 4, the state's exhibit 131. I see you notated items 4A and 4B. Now, before we get into items 4A and 4B, there appears to be a piece of firearms evidence that was not tested.
Yes, sir. It's item 4C. So it was another item within the package. It's a lead fragment. There's nothing that I could do with this for comparison purposes to give you any information. So it was not examined.
Now, items 4A. How many items are within that specific subset?
Item 4A were 4 coin envelopes. Each of these envelopes contained one 45 auto cartridge case.
And what,
Auto cartridge case.
and in your report, you correspond items 4A and the 445 caliber cartridge casings and provide numbers 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Yes, sir.
Is that consistent with what was in the crime scene report as they were labeled?
Yes, sir. The number 8, 9, 10, and 11 were numbers taken off of the package.
What sort of testing did you perform on items 4A?
So again, I determined the class characteristic of these cartridge cases. First of all, their caliber, but then the shape of the firing pin impression and the shape of the breech face marks, location of extractor and ejector marks. Looked to see if they were shared among the group, and they were. So then I went further and I looked for their individual characteristics. Looked at the firing pin impression, the breech face marks, and the extractor mark, and found that they shared the same individual characteristics. So that I could say all 4 of the 45 auto cartridge cases were fired from the same firearm because, again, they shared the same class characteristics and the same individual characteristics.
Now, as it relates to items 4B, there appears to be 5 items within that subsection. What are those 5 items?
State Exhibit 131 and specifically item 4B contains 5 380 cartridge cases, 1 each within a coin envelope.
And what sort of testing and analysis did you perform on items 4B?
So again, I performed the same testing as I did on the 45 auto cartridge cases. I examined the class characteristics first. They shared the same class characteristics, and so they could possibly have been fired from the same firearm. And then I looked at the individual characteristics, and they all shared the same individual characteristics. So all 5 380 cartridge cases were fired from the same firearm.
So the shell casings that were fired from or ejected from the firearms in items 4A and 4B, those would have been fired from a semi-automatic handgun. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in your experience in testing firearms and examining firearms, when a shell casing is ejected from a particular firearm, is there a specific distance in which it travels from the firearm?
I did not have a firearm to test in this circumstance, but just in my experience in firing a firearm in the normal shooting position. So that means holding it in this position, a cartridge case will typically extract and eject and then kick across the shooter's right shoulder at about a 45-degree angle, typically about 6 to 8 feet.
And is it possible for shell casings, and based on your training, knowledge, and experience in firearms examination, for it to travel even further than that, if it's been manipulated in any way?
Yes, sir. When I say 6 or 8 feet, that would mean the point that it first touches the ground. Now, there are many conditions that could affect this. If we're in a tight space, maybe a car or a small room, if there's walls or ceilings that are close by, those cartridge cases hitting the wall and ceiling would affect where that cartridge case is going to land. And then you also have situations such as the surface that it's landing on. So is it landing on a concrete surface where it may hit, then bounce? Or is it landing in sand somewhere it's going to stick as soon as it hits, or grass, something like that? And then you also have the circumstance of foot traffic or vehicle traffic.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. I appreciate your time. No further questions.
Ms. Fagan, questions for Ms. Jordan?
Just good morning, how are you? Ultimately, you were able to identify a 380, correct? 380 bullet?
Yes, ma'am.
And that bullet came from the autopsy, the medical examiner?
Yes, ma'am.
Last question. And you also found a 45 bullet,
Yes, ma'am.
and that came from the autopsy?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. King, any questions for Ms. Jordan?
No questions.
Any follow-up, Mr. Rao?
No, Judge.
Questions from the jurors for Ms. Jordan? Yep, take your time. Thank you, sir. Mr. Rao? After the trial. Maroon suit. Ms. Jordan, are you able, from the evidence you received and the work you did, to determine the distance either of the projectiles you examined had traveled before they struck whatever object they struck?
No, sir.
Do you know from where the two projectiles that you examined came?
No, sir.
So you're not in a position to say, if it turns out that one came from one part of a individual's body and one from the other, you don't know which one came from place A or place B?
No, sir, I do not.
Based on your analysis of the shell casings, how many firearms are represented by the universe of shell casings you examined?
There were two unique firearms at this crime scene. One was a .45 auto pistol. One was a .380 auto pistol.
And one of the projectiles you examined was a .380 and one was a .45.
Yes, sir.
Were the two projectiles, I'll call them bullets, that you looked at fired from the same gun?
The two bullets were uniquely fired from two different firearms. So a .45 pistol fired the .45 caliber bullet. A .380 pistol fired the .380 bullet.
Are you able to tell if the projectiles came from a semi-automatic handgun versus a pistol?
Those calibers are more consistent with being fired from a semi-automatic pistol. However, I cannot tell you for certain that they were fired from a semi-automatic pistol.
Mr. Rao, do you have any questions that follow up on what Ms. Jordan and I just discussed?
Okay.
Ms. Fagan?
Yes, sir. Okay. Now, we discussed the projectiles during my class. You also reviewed the shell casings in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And in this case, you had 4 .45 shell casings to review,
4 .45 auto cartridge cases. Yes, ma'am.
and you had 5 .380s?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. King?
No questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan, for your time. Appreciate it. Mr. Rao or Mr. Abate, you guys got me guessing now who's going to take the next witness.
Keep you guessing. I'm gonna take the next witness, Mr. Terrence Blige.
Okay. There's a bunch of stuff on the witness stand as Mr. Blige is making his way in here. If you could get that. Thank you.
All right, Terrence Blige.
Can you spell your name, please?
Yes, TERRENCE BLIGE.
Great. And Mr. Blige, if you get a little closer to the microphone, you're welcome to the chair. It's tricky. You did it. Tricky to slide. You got your morning workout. All right.
Good morning, Mr. Blige.
Morning.
Can you tell me if you have any children?
Yes, I do.
How many children do you have?
2.
And is Tyree Blige one of your children?
Yes.
And in a second, I'm going to ask, can you identify your son here in the courtroom by describing an article of clothing that he's wearing? Your Honor, if now is an appropriate time.
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen in the courtroom, including deputies, if you'd all remove your masks temporarily so that Mr. Blige can do what Mr. Abate is about to ask.
And Mr. Blige, can you identify an article of clothing your son is wearing and who he's sitting next to? Or if it's a male or female?
Yes. My son's right there, the gray suit on.
Gray suit and sitting next to,
His attorney, Miss Nicole Fegan.
okay. You're going to need to speak up. I think I heard you, but
I'm
importantly, Ms. Rivers needs to be able to hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Rivers.
That's okay. Court's not easy for lots of folks.
Gotcha.
Now,
Masks back on, everyone.
thank you, Mr. Blige.
Okay.
You can keep your.
Not you,
Okay.
right? Nor Mr. Abate. Everyone else, though.
Okay.
Back in July of 2019, did you own a black 2003 Mercedes E500?
That's my son's car.
That's your son's car?
Yes.
Okay.
When you say your son, do you mean the Miss Tyree Blige? Okay.
And what color is it?
Blue.
Is it a dark blue, light blue?
It's a blue, like, let's just say blue. I can't say dark blue. It's a blue car.
Okay. Is it like navy blue, like my suit, or is it?
It's lighter than your suit.
Okay. And on July 12th of 2019, did your son own that car?
I can't remember, but I believe, I can't remember when it was sold.
Did your son live with you at that time?
My son lived with me and his mother.
Okay. And where or what area, don't tell me your address, do you live?
Macon,
And what area does his mother live in?
Rex.
Rex?
Yes.
Okay. Is that near Morrow, Georgia, or Morrow, Georgia?
Mm, I don't really know. I just know Rex, Georgia.
Okay.
It's off 675.
Gotcha. And back in November of 2019, did you help with the sale of that Mercedes?
I can't remember the date, but I believe I did help with the
Okay.
sale.
If I showed you a copy of the sales agreement, would that help refresh your recollection?
No, I remember selling it, just can't remember the exact date.
Would looking at the sales receipt help refresh your recollection as to the date?
I'm being realistic. I sold it. I helped with the sale. Can't remember the date.
Okay. So I'm gonna show you this piece of paper, and if it
Okay.
refreshes your recollection, you just.
I'm not saying I didn't sell it. I did. So it doesn't.
He's not saying you didn't sell it, sir. He's
It
asking
don't
you to
matter.
look at something and he's going to ask you a couple questions about that and we'll
Okay.
see where we go.
All right.
Looking in the top part of the sales agreement, do you see the date?
Yes, I do see it.
Okay. And does that help refresh your recollection as to when the Mercedes was sold?
Yeah, guess so.
And when was the Mercedes sold?
And said on 11, 16, 19.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor. Oh, I do have one question. I'm sorry. When back in July, late July of 2019, did you have an opportunity to speak with Detective Savannah Berry?
A lady called me on the phone and she sent me a text message. Yes.
And, while speaking with the lady, did you look at video or a photo of that included your son at a club?
Yes, she sent it to my phone.
Okay. And were you able to identify your son in that photo?
Yes.
And the son we're talking about, because I know you have two, is that Tyree Blige?
No, I have one son and a daughter.
I apologize.
But yes, Tyree Blige is the son I identified. And I told her that I would bring him down to the police station if there was any problem.
Okay. And do you call your son Tyree or do you call him by a nickname?
No, Tyree.
Now I have no further questions, Judge.
Okay, can you make the big screen not have whatever's on it? Thank you.
Yes, Judge.
Ms. Fagan?
Mr. Blige, did you want to testify today?
Of course, nobody want to testify against a child. It's ridiculous.
Now, you cooperated with police though, correct?
Yes, I did.
Do you have an opinion of whether or not Tyree's aggressive?
Oh, no, he's passive. He don't bother nobody.
Like,
All right.
Mr. King, any questions for Mr. Blige?
I have no questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect, Mr. Abate? Any questions from the jurors? All right, may Mr. Blige go?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir, for being here. Appreciate it.
All right.
State's next witness is?
Detective Savannah Berry.
Judge, can we approach the very quick second?
We sure can. You all can be at ease. Detective Barry is in the building, but got stuck somewhere and is on her way over here. So we're not taking a break because that'll suddenly add 15 minutes and she is low single digit minutes away. So just relax. If you want to stand up, but please don't leave the courtroom. So Mr. Rao, can we get an update? Because it's been more time than Mr. Abate said, and I don't want to keep our jurors sitting here if they could be doing other things. Well, that's what I was told last time. This is a different on her way?
No, Judge, she was stuck on the third floor presenting a case to grand jury, so she's on her way.
Happy to see you.
Thank you. Savannah Berry, SAVANNAHBERRY.
Detective, if you would please remove your mask for your testimony, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good morning, Detective Barry.
Good morning.
Can you tell the jurors how you are currently employed?
City of Atlanta Police Department and the Homicide Unit,
And how long have you been with the City of Atlanta Police Department?
almost 9 years.
And how long have you been assigned to the Homicide Unit?
Almost 3 years.
And can you tell the jurors a little bit about your job responsibilities and duties as a homicide detective?
Sure. With homicide, we respond to, of course, homicides investigations, even death investigations, kidnappings, and missing persons. How we work as far as how we get our cases is there's this rotation that we work, and when you're at the top of the rotation, the very next case goes to the person at top. You take that case, you just move to the bottom. And that's usually how we work our homicide rotation.
Now, I want to direct your attention to July 12th of 2019, where you dispatched or assigned to a homicide that occurred on that day.
Yes, sir.
And can you tell the jurors where you were dispatched to first?
I was told that a shooting happened at 2101 Tula Street. However, I responded first to Piedmont Hospital, which is just a few blocks from that location, which was my first location that I responded to.
And the 2101 Tula Street address, is that here in the city of Atlanta, Fulton County?
Yes,
And tell the jurors what is that location or what is that address?
it's a nightclub. It's called the Buckhead Loft.
And you said that you responded to Piedmont Hospital first. How far is Piedmont Hospital and the Buckhead Loft?
It's no more than 4 blocks away from this incident location.
Now, when you first arrived at Piedmont Hospital, did you speak with any other officers?
Yes, I
Okay.
spoke with some officers and some witnesses that were on scene in the parking lot outside of the hospital.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors the witnesses that you encountered or spoke to at Piedmont Hospital?
Yes. There was one gentleman, his name is Mr. Rivers. He came out of the hospital upon my arrival, very distraught. I recall him very emotional. He began crying. He cried in the arms of another female who was there on scene, and he made statements. And I know he was talking about the decedent, the victim, saying that it wasn't his fault. He shouldn't, something along the lines of that. He had nothing to do with it, was what he said. So of course, that let me know that they were there, or at least he was there. And I spoke with them there on scene, and they stated that there was a fight that ensued and then shots fired. And that's all that they told me at that time there at the hospital.
While you were at the hospital, did you speak to some females as well?
Yes, the female that he was crying to was one, Rhea Thompson, and then another, Kiana Clark and Helen Abraham. They were all there at the scene, and they each gave me that very brief description of what happened.
And when you got to the hospital, were you able to determine how the victim was transported?
Yes, Rhea Thompson's SUV, it was a black SUV that she used to go to the club that night. They put the victim inside of that SUV and transported him directly to the hospital.
Okay. Now, while at the hospital, did you also speak to were you able to determine the identity of the deceased?
Yes, his mother was on scene, and as well with him was his girlfriend, Miss Rivers, who I spoke with there at the hospital as well. So we did know his identification that night.
And lastly, were you able to speak with Miss Kiera Pliat, another key?
Yes, they're on scene.
Okay. Now, after you spoke with these individuals at the hospital, can you tell the jurors what you did next?
I responded to Tula Street. I responded to the scene to see what was left over for investigative purposes, collect evidence, collect surveillance footage, any witness statements there at the time. I just went to the scene to process the scene.
And when you arrived, can you tell the jurors what the scene was like or how it was when you encountered it?
Sure. Now, first responders did lock down the scene. They were able to put, the crime scene tape. There were some vehicles that were still in the parking lot that had damage due to the gunshots. We did collect additional shell casings. There were 2 different calibers, which told me that there were 2 different shooters. Trying to see what the caliber. It was 4 45 caliber and 5 380 calibers that was still left there on scene. I knew that there were some surveillance footage available, but I could not get that very night. I got that later. Additionally, there were no witnesses who were left on scene. There was Mrs. Clatt's credit card that was still on scene. I believe there was an Apple Watch still on scene. And of course, the identification of Javonta Rivers, his sister, Miss Rivers, which is the decedent's girlfriend. So I had their identification, which is where I followed up with speaking with them the very next day after, emotions went down. And they live in Monroe, Georgia. So I traveled out there to speak with them. And this was prior to me viewing any surveillance footage.
Okay, and prior to traveling to Monroe, Georgia, I just want to show you a few photographs. Were you on scene, or did you arrive when the scene was being processed?
Yes, it was still being processed when I arrived there.
Now, can you explain to the jurors your part in the processing of the scene, your role?
My role in processing is just pointing out everything that I need for my evidence to investigate the case. So of course I wanted all of the shell casings. I even went out there the next day because you see, it was just as dark. That's how dark it was upon my arrival. The shooting happened after 2 a.m. So even in the daylight, I went back out to collect all those shell casings, went back out to collect the surveillance footage. We collect that card, the watch, and there was nothing else to process on this particular scene. So my role is just to make sure I see everything and to collect everything that I'm able to take at that time.
Now, and when we're looking at the crime scene photos that have been admitted, can you tell the jurors in this photograph where the Buckhead loft would be located? I know you can't see it, but in what direction would it be on the screen?
Go tremendously to the right.
Okay. In the state's exhibit, do you see like a white pergola type situation?
A what situation now?
A white pergola is what I'd call it, or the white roof looking thing.
Yes. Oh, yes, I see it.
Other than pergola, I'm at a loss for words in relation to the Buckhead loft.
So again, the Buckhead loft, you have to go a little bit to the actual right to see what the loft looks like. But if you keep going straight past that, you end up hitting Peachtree. But it's all private property. It's only one way in, one way out, and you have to pass that to go both in and out on that property.
Okay, and you said there's only one way in and one way out.
Correct.
So if you're coming down Peachtree, do you take a right or a left if you're going towards Buckhead to get to the club?
If you're going north on Peachtree, you turn left and it'll say Bennett Street.
Okay, and when you turn onto Bennett Street, how far down does Bennett Street go?
You're spilled into this parking lot. If you keep straight on Bennett, and not even a block long is that street. And if you come down, you have to make this hard left. I appreciate it, to find Buckhead Loft.
Now, if you don't make the hard left, can you describe to the jurors, and Mr. Rao's going to share a blow up here in a second. How can you keep going down?
Yes, you'll pass this right here, which all appears to very much be private property, but it's not. The street spills into private property.
Okay.
And then again, in order to leave out, you have to go out the same way you came in, back onto Bennett and then on Peachtree Street.
Now, when you go all the way down to where does Bennett dead end?
honestly, past the crime scene, I didn't even go all the way down. I stayed in the area. So I don't know what it looks like on the other side of this particular building. But my whole scene stopped at basically what we just saw, the previous picture that we saw.
And is part of the reason you didn't go all the way down because there's only one way in and one way out?
Correct. And there was, as far as in my investigation, nothing led me to the very back of the building. Whereas all the action happened in the front of this particular building, if I need to point it out.
Okay. And while you were out on scene, did you notice or see that there was video surveillance cameras throughout this plaza?
Correct, I did.
And can you, in this, on the screen, can you identify in State's Exhibit 130, kind of the buildings in which video surveillance was seen?
Sure. How would you like for me to point them out?
So that's a fancy touch screen. The judge is going to tell you how to use a pencil, and then you can circle the areas.
Yeah, so you got a bunch of things to press first. So stay muted. That'll make people happy. Got it? And then just tap the screen once, anywhere, it doesn't matter. Lower left-hand corner, there's a pencil icon, little circle, gray circle, tap that. And now you should be able to draw.
Okay, so there's cameras here. There's cameras here in this building. There's cameras at this building. There was a camera up here. There's another camera right here. And of course, there's cameras right here at the Buckhead Law. There's cameras inside the Buckhead Law. And those are my key cameras.
Okay. And you said you weren't able to view any video surveillance footage at that time.
That's correct. I may have this one in here confused. I know there's an angle where we can see the vehicles come in and out. But yeah, I wasn't able to look at any of these surveillance cameras on the night of, nor the day after.
Okay. And how long do you think you remained on scene?
I know it was daylight because I met with Fulton County when the sun came up. The shooting happened at 2. I know it was daylight when I was done on scene.
And when you say Fulton County, is that
The
medical-
DA's office,
Okay.
they respond out to our homicides on scene.
Okay. Now, you said that you located, there was in the middle of the crime scene was you say Apple Watch?
Yes, I don't know whose watch. It was one of the females' watch, actually.
Okay.
I can't recall which, but that in one of their debit cards.
Okay.
The debit card was Kiera Klatz.
Okay. And while on scene that morning or early morning, did you make contact with Detective T?
Yes, he's our homeland investigator who extracts all of the surveillance footages for us.
Okay. After doing that, you said you traveled to Monroe, Georgia?
Correct. Myself and Detective Shepard.
And about how long does it take to get up there?
About an hour.
Okay. And you said yourself and Detective Shepard?
Correct.
Can you tell the jurors why you travel in pairs when you interview witnesses?
Sure. Extra eyes and ears are always great. And of course, to have the partnership to help us, well, we help each other with making sure all questions are answered and asked and important facts are pointed out to each other. It just helps have that extra brain in the important investigation of a homicide.
Okay. And when you arrived, whose house were you going to?
We went to visit the decedent's girlfriend and Mr. Rivers, who both were there on scene that night.
Okay. And when you
So
say-
basically witnesses to me.
And when you say the decedent's girlfriend, are you referring to Jacayla Rivers?
Kayla, yes.
So when you arrived at their home in Monroe, Georgia, did you speak to them together? Who did you speak to first?
I spoke with Jacayla, who had been on Instagram trying to figure out who killed her boyfriend. She provided me that there was a guy who was wearing a white shirt with a big black Nike check on it. And she stated that he pushed a girl and the girl fell onto a vehicle, and then she kind of fast forward the story saying that a fight came up. Yeah, that's exactly what she provided. I'm sorry.
Let me share my screen real fast.
And so she stated that he was the primary reason why the whole fight started. And then eventually she said there were shots fired. She gave me a description of a shooter to have had dreads that was standing like at the top of a hill. And then when I spoke with her brother, he described the same type of shooter, guy with dreads, but nothing as far as what really led up to exactly how the fight happened and how the shots were fired. They didn't know about the scene. They didn't know how many shell cases are 2 different calibers. They knew nothing about that. I told them that we were going to look at surveillance cameras, but they were not yet viewed. So that was their statements at that very first time. However, when she provided this picture right here, I was able to turn it over to Homeland. They went over the Department of Driver Services to try to get an identity of the guy that's in the red jacket. She stated that the guy that's in the red jacket was the one with the white t-shirt, big black check. The DDS did positively give me an identification off of this photo right here and gave me the name of William Lewis. Of course,
DDS would be,
Department of Driver Services. Of course, with the name and the date of birth, I was able to get an address. He lived in Rex, Georgia.
And while speaking with Mr. Rivers and Mrs. Rivers, were they able to give you a description of the vehicle that they saw in the vicinity of the shooting?
Any vehicle in the whole incident? Which vehicle?
Did they describe a vehicle that they believe the shooter was in?
I can't recall if they did give me a description of a vehicle.
Okay. About how long did that interview last?
Maybe an hour there in Monroe,
Okay.
speaking with the both of them.
And this was the second time in which this was a follow-up interview?
No, I'm just talking about that first interview
Okay.
that I did in Monroe. I did do a follow-up in Monroe, but that was after we saw the surveillance cameras.
But this was the second time that you had spoken to them in less than
Yes.
24 hours?
Correct.
Okay. Now, as it pertains to the description of the vehicle that they were able to provide to you, would looking at a copy of your lead supplement help refresh your recollection?
Yes, as far as the description of what the shooter drove.
Yes. I'm going to give you a copy of your supplement.
Thank you so
Page
much.
3. If you will read that and then if that refreshes your after you've done read it, or excuse me, after you read it, please look up.
Silver sedan.
Okay.
So Mrs. Rivers, Jakayla described only one shooter, black male with dreads.
Let me ask you one question real fast. Did looking at a copy of your report help refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Okay. And what color, what description did they give of the vehicle they believe that a shooter was in?
The silver sedan.
Okay.
Thank you.
So after that interview lasted about an hour,
Yes.
can you tell the jurors what you did next?
I was able to investigate it. He had the video surveillance prepared for me, so we just reviewed them.
Okay. And how much footage was there that you were able to recover?
It was a lot of footage. Footage from inside of the club, just outside of the club, including all of the points that I put on the map where there were cameras. It was a good amount of footage.
Now, in the initial footage that you recovered, can you describe to the jury, I guess, the angle in which you could see anything that was happening?
Yes. Now, when I did get the footage, it wasn't all in one. I got them slowly available for me to view. The very first one, if you want to pull up That was my first, but this is a good view of the actual incident.
Let me pull up. I'm sorry. No. 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 Well, I'm trying to pull up what you described to the jurors, the angle in which you were
That
able.
last clip that you pulled up, the actual camera came from in that same little corridor. If you want to put up the actual map where I marked where the cameras are,
Yes.
I'd be happy to point out. My first angle, Yana, how can I get that pin back?
Sorry.
How can I
Pardon
get
me?
that pin back so I can mark him here?
If you tap the screen, nothing's happening. What does this say in the upper left-hand corner? I can't read that. That's not.
Oh, live on YouTube, courtroom 8B,
Oh,
podium is
okay.
talking.
That just
I'm
means
talking.
that people are watching you on YouTube. Your things. So if you, I don't know what happened. Hold your finger on it for a little bit. See what happens. You come up. It's like you broke it.
Did I?
Oh, yeah, I can find it.
Your Honor, may she step down?
Well, one other option. If you would drag, put your finger all the way to the left and pull slowly to the right. So pull, let's move in the picture, all the way to the left. Start on the far left and slide your finger across. Interesting. I don't know what happened. You did break it.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
No, I'm
Can
kidding.
I like point up there?
Yeah, you're gonna have to get up if you don't mind.
So the first camera angle that I was able to observe this was right up here. That was, and it shot this area right here. This is the biggest.
And can you describe to the jurors when you were able to see that footage, what you saw?
Yes, I was able to see the altercation. Gentleman with the big black Nike check, Mr. Lewis, is his name. You can see him push down a female, later identified as Asia Ashley, which is Mr. Lewis's girlfriend at the time. And she fell down and she slightly was close to Jakayla's vehicle, which was a red sedan. That ensued. Actually, after she was pushed down, there was no altercation after that. It was after Asia was in her vehicle and she was pulling off without Mr. Lewis. Clearly, after she got pushed by him, they had their altercation, but it was just a verbal altercation. She intends to leave him there until, while she's driving, the same group of females, Miss Clack, Miss Helen, and Rhea, I believe they thought that she was going to hit them with her vehicle on accident. I mean, keep in mind, these folks were drunk. This is 2 a.m. They've had a lot of libations by this time. And they began banging on her car, causing a big disturbance. And at that time, Mr. Lewis saw the females was being aggressive at his girlfriend's vehicle. So he came over and ensued a fight with the females. Because of that, it's my understanding that, and again, Mr. and Mrs. Rivers explained this to me as well, that that's when the decedent saw the Nike checked Mr. Lewis fighting females. So for the female's defense, Mr. Smith, the decedent, went to fight Mr. Lewis. And that's how the physical altercation started.
And
You can see that in the footage.
the footage that you're looking at, is it one continuous clip or is it several clips that you're having to continue to go through as you receive it?
I can't remember if it was one long clip or a lot of small clips.
Is this the angle?
That's it right there.
Okay.
It's not shared right now. Thank you.
Yes, Judge.
So am I able to speak? Describe what I'm seeing for a little bit here?
So I'm asking,
Okay.
is what you're saying in State's Exhibit 133, is it what you kind of just described or what you described a second ago to the jury? This
Yes.
angle?
Yes, this
Okay.
is the angle.
And at the pause, where we're at 2:16:55, can you explain to the jury what's going on based on your viewing of the video surveillance?
At this time right now, this shots have stopped. There will be actually, I believe there's going to be an additional shooting for one suspect, but at this time, the victim has been shot. He's laying down and his friends are about to load him up and take him over to the hospital.
Okay. Where do the additional shots, where do they come from based on your viewing of the video surveillance? I want to back up.
Okay.
Do you see in your right-hand side of the screen, can you point to the jury or say stop when you see additional shots?
Okay. There, you saw the two flash, that was to the left side.
Okay, and will you circle on, well, you can't, will you describe on the screen where exactly?
I can show.
Okay,
You're welcome to keep getting up. I don't know what you did with the screen. Mr. Rao, can you just get that chair out of the way so that the tech doesn't have to keep moving it? Let's move it to another space. Don't tear the cable. Great. Thank you.
now, were you able to also see shots fired kind of near the red vehicle?
Yes,
And were you able to determine who that individual was?
yeah, that was Javante
Okay.
shooting,
And
shooting in the same direction as the shooters.
thank you. Now, after viewing this set of footage from this angle, can you tell the jurors what you did next?
I went back out to Monroe because I was able to identify the gentleman who was shooting from that red vehicle with the white t-shirt on. That was Mr. Rivers. And of course, that'll be different from his statement that he gave me, I believe, just the day before. So myself and Detective Shepard went back out there to re-interview both him and his sister.
And prior to going out to see Mr. and Mrs. Rivers, were the shots that you were able to determine that Javante Rivers had fired, were they after the many shots that were fired by the two individuals, the one who got out of the sedan and the other one who walked up next?
They were after.
Okay. And upon your second trip to Monroe, can you tell the jurors what was the result of that?
He became honest at that point and told me that he was shooting. No good reason why he couldn't tell me that before. Asked him where did the gun come from? At first he said he just saw it and then he picked it up, but then he said he took it from a female. He couldn't tell me who the female was, but he stated that she seemed shocked and stunned at the time, but he saw the gun, so he grabbed the gun from her, and he stated he fired shots in the air, like warning shots.
Okay. And in your viewing of this video surveillance and the additional footage that you were able to receive, were you able to confirm
That he
was shooting in the air?
not in the air, he was shooting, but it didn't appear to look like it was in the air.
Okay. What direction was it pointed towards?
Same directions as the other shooters, which is towards the back area, further to the right, if you're looking at the screen.
And in your viewing of the surveillance, had the victim, Solomon Smith, already fallen after or before Javante Rivers fired his shot?
He fell before Mr. Rivers shot his gun.
Now, when you say Mr. Rivers told the truth or was honest, did he do that without knowing you had seen him on video surveillance?
No, it was after I told him I saw surveillance. Of course, they wondered why we made another trip back out, and it was explaining that we saw the surveillance.
So you didn't arrive and Mr. Rivers say, the secretary, I need to tell you something, I shot him.
That's correct.
He only told you after you confronted him with the fact that you had seen him shooting on the video surveillance.
That is correct.
Okay. And when speaking, did you speak with Ms. Rivers as well?
Yes.
Cameron? And when speaking with her, did she maintain that she didn't see her brother with a firearm?
No, she knew that he shot that night as well. So that was the only part of the story that the both of them together changed. Kayla told him to get rid of the gun by just dropping it on scene. And still that gun has never been recovered.
Okay. And when speaking with Javante Rivers, were you able, did you ask him multiple times where the gun was?
Yes, he wasn't able to advise. I asked, could it have been back with the same female that he got it from? And he just said that he did not know.
Right. And after this second trip, and I guess third interaction with both Kayla and Javante Rivers, can you tell the jurors what you did next as a part of your investigation?
So with the identity of Mr. Lewis, I attempted twice to go to his home to speak with him, but his mother and sister just told me that he wasn't home. I went on his Instagram or Twitter, and I saw that he had a nice relationship with the Clayton County Juvenile Court Judge, Mr. Steve Teskey, I believe his name is. So I reached out to him and I explained to him this case, and I told him that Mr. Lewis isn't a suspect in my homicide, maybe a battery charge, considering that I could see him push down a female. However, I wanted to just have a meeting with him and ask about this particular incident. So I did. I reached out to the judge. He reached out to Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis, as a good friend to the judge, agreed to come and sit with me there at his office in Clayton County.
Now let's talk a little bit about that interview. Did you threaten or force Mr. Lewis to come to that interview?
No.
Okay. And did you tell Mr. Lewis during that interview that he could terminate it or leave at any point?
I did. He was explained to that by my partner who went with me. His name is Detective Sajak.
And did you tell Mr. Lewis that you were giving him any hope, benefit, or making any promises? You made a statement.
No,
And did he voluntarily remain and speak to you?
he did.
And while you were speaking with Mr. Lewis, you said Detective Sajak was there. Did Judge Teskey remain in the interview room?
Yes, and he made it clear just as a friend, not as an attorney, just as support.
Okay.
But yes, he remained in the room.
And during that interview, did Mr. Lewis acknowledge or admit to you that he had punched his girlfriend?
I don't believe he actually said that he did that, but he did describe that something happened that made his girlfriend slightly brush against the victim's car.
So would it be based on your observations that he was trying to minimize his actions that evening?
Yes, I would.
After talking to him about what he had done, did you show him any photographs?
I did.
And I want to show you what's already been admitted as State's Exhibit 138, I believe. Now, in State's Exhibit 138, do you, well, I gotta share my screen so you can see it. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and during the interview with Mr. Lewis and with Judge Teskey present, did you show him this photograph?
I did, yes.
And was he able to identify himself?
Yes.
Okay, and how'd you get this photo?
This is the surveillance right outside the Buckhead Loft Club, the club.
Okay, is this a screenshot of it?
Correct, of
Okay.
the video.
And what's the timestamp on that photograph?
12:27 a.m. at the 19th second.
Okay. And based on your viewing of the video surveillance, had Mr. Lewis and the males behind him gone into the club yet?
No, they're going into the club.
Now, while showing him this photograph, was he able to identify the male that is in the very, very back of the photo with black pants and 3 stripes down it?
He gave me a nickname for that gentleman. After he had a conversation with the judge was able to provide me his full name.
And what was the nickname he gave?
He just gave me the nickname of Ted.
Okay. And
But that's actually his last name.
were you able to get, you said you were able to get the full name. What is the full name of the male in the back of the photograph?
Just the one with the all black one.
Yes.
That's Xavier Head.
Okay. Now, did he provide you with any other identification or any other names?
Yeah, he was prepared. Of course, the meeting that we had together was basically organized by that judge. He was prepared to tell me about a Tyree Blige. But he's not in this photograph. But in this photograph, they give me Trey, this Holly.
Mhm.
His last name is Holly.
Okay.
And Quentin was given to me as well. Can you scroll back?
Yes.
down? But he's not in this photograph.
Okay, so do you see where it says second chance sentenced and
That would be Quentin,
adult court? Okay.
correct. And he
And-
also gave the idea of Nick, but
Who wrote second chance sentence in adult court?
Detective Sajak
Okay. And was that information that you were provided by Judge Teskey?
later.
Okay.
Yes,
Now, did you show this photograph of Tress and Holly to Will?
yes,
And was he able to positively identify him as Tress and Holly?
yes,
The same individual that is the third male in State's Exhibit 138 with dreads and a black t-shirt?
correct.
Okay. And do you see State's Exhibit 136 with the individual with the red circle and looks like a zip-up jacket on?
Yes,
Did you show this photograph to William Lewis?
yes,
And when you showed this photograph to William Lewis, was he able to give you a name or identification?
he did.
And what was that?
He gave me Tyree Blige. Wasn't able to spell it, but that's what he gave me.
And in State's Exhibit 137, can you tell me who is that?
That's William Lewis.
And then in State's Exhibit 139, who is the female in the white?
That's Mr. Lewis's girlfriend at the time, Asia Ashley.
Okay, and is that the female that what he punched through into the vehicle that belonged to Miss Rivers?
Yes, sir.
Now,
Before you shift gears, I want to give our jurors a morning break because we need to have our lunch break sharp at noon. And if we wait any longer for your morning break, you won't have one. I don't want to make you go all the way to noon. This will be shorter. You're only going into the jury room. But ladies and gentlemen, I'll try to get you back in here in 5-6 minutes, assuming you've had enough time to do what you need to do during your morning break. But know that at noon, we have to stop for our lunch break. Please go with the sergeant. Don't talk about the case. No outside research. And we'll see you in 5 or 6 minutes. Mr. Abate, anything before we break? Mr. King?
No, sir.
Ms. Fagan?
Yeah.
All right, take a quick break. I'll be back in a sec. Thank you.
There you go. Anything?
How long do you think this lunch break will be?
1 hour.
I'm good, thank you. Is Rickman around? Is he like here in the, I just want to introduce myself.
Okay. Want it now?
Sure.
Yeah. That works. Correct. That's all Zoom stuff. I'm gonna add it in here and see if that fixes it.
Can you hear me? Yes, you can.
Trying to get the screen fixed that you broke.
How are we gonna do
Yeah. What is that? All right, can you try again, please, Detective? That one, and then just tap the screen. You get the little, you don't get the little pencil in the corner. Nope, all right. Oh, yeah, but that's all Zoom stuff. I tried that while you're on your break. That's not it. So I'm gonna find out from our IT folks. All right, so we just nailed that. Mr. King is here. All right, Mr. Abate, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Let's get back on the record. Mr. King, you ready?
Ready.
Ms. Fagan? All right, let's bring the jurors in, please. If they're, assuming they're ready, make sure they got 5 more minutes than I thought.
All right, Steve, you're up.
Thank you, Sergeant. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I tried to fix the touchscreen during the break and didn't work. So someone may appear during Detective Barry's testimony to press the magic button. We'll see. Mr. Abate, you may continue your direct examination.
So we were talking about the interview with Mr. Lewis and his mentor, Judge Teskey. And during your interview with Mr. Lewis, did he talk about speaking with Tyree Blige?
Yes.
And can you tell me what he relayed to you about his conversation with Tyree Blige?
What he said specifically was that he was going to turn himself in. He just wanted to get an attorney.
Okay. And when speaking with Mr. Lewis, did you request Mr. Blige's phone number?
Yes, I did.
And did he give it to you?
He didn't. He wanted to speak with him directly. He wanted to speak with Mr. Blige first and like pass along my information to him.
Okay.
So it wasn't collected that day.
And was he also hesitant when showing the photograph with all of the individuals that he was with entering the club to give you his what he called his associates' names?
Yeah, very much so. That's he did describe them to be associates at first. He was very hesitant to answer your question. He was very hesitant. But then later he said that they're not just associates, they're like his brothers. So yes, he was very uncomfortable sharing additional information besides what he was prepared to share with me, which was just Mr. Blige's information, which was he was going to get an attorney.
And was he also, use a good word, uncomfortable that you knew his identity?
Yeah, he asked me, it was one of the things that he needed to know how I got his identification. So yes.
Okay.
Mr. Lewis wanted to know how you got Mr. Lewis's identification?
Yes, sir.
Now, when speaking with Mr. Lewis, did you ask him, but I can confirm with you that there's just more to the story. I don't know if Tyree explained it to you, but he was not the only one shooting from your crew.
Objection, hearsay.
So what I'm going to need you to do is not read that aloud. You can share it with the detective. Questions are not hearsay, but the only question in what you're reading is something you haven't gotten to yet. That's not hearsay. Preceding it, I don't know that I hear an exception yet based on who's testifying. So if you want to share this to refresh, I don't know that this witness has said, I don't remember yet. So you're gonna need to think of another way to ask it.
When speaking with Mr. Lewis, did you talk about how you had seen the video surveillance?
I did.
And did you inform him that you could see that there was more than one shooter?
Yes.
And did he tell you he had spoken to Tyree Blige?
He did.
And when you were talking to him about the fact that he had spoken to Mr. Blige, as well as your observation on the video surveillance, did you ask him if Tyree Blige indicated there was more than one person shooting in his group?
Yes, I did ask.
And do you recall what Mr. Lewis or how he responded?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
Okay. I repeated the question and he just announced that that's what I know. That's all I heard, which is he was referring to what Mr. Blige said. And that was his answer. That's all I know. Did you know there was more than one shooter? That's all I know. And he said that from what Blige told him, because just a reminder, he was already gone off the scene, Mr. Lewis, when the shots were fired. So he knew that shots were fired, considering it was heard. He did hear the shots. But Mr. Blige, his answer to me was, as far as he know, that there was more than one shooter, which was told by Mr. Blige.
Okay. Now, when speaking with Mr. Lewis, did he describe or talk to you about the need to be hanging out or traveling with people with guns?
Objection, hearsay.
I didn't hear enough of the question to be able to assess that.
Okay. Did he just, during your conversation with Mr. Lewis, did he describe to you that it was necessary or he had a need to travel with people with firearms when in Atlanta?
Okay. Now I've heard the question. You still have a hearsay objection?
First of all, he's introducing the hearsay in the question, which I believe is inappropriate. And then the confirmation would be hearsay as well, because he's asking about William Lewis's statement, which is actually the hearsay portion in which I was asking to be excluded,
Okay.
not being introduced.
No, understood. I want to make sure who the he was. The he is all Mr. Lewis. This isn't Mr. Lewis referring to someone else. It's all Mr. Lewis.
Yes, sir.
Overrule.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. When speaking with Mr. Lewis during that interview on July 25th, do you remember him telling you that when in Atlanta, it's necessary for him to travel with people with firearms?
I recall. Yes, I recall.
Now, at any point during your interview with Mr. Lewis, did you promise him that he would never have to come to court?
No.
And in fact, at any point during your interview with William Lewis, did you make him any promises at all?
No.
During your interview with Mr. Lewis, was he very worried or reluctant about his fact that he made a statement getting out?
Yeah, he was very worried. He made it clear.
Objection, speculation.
Did he tell you he was worried?
No, he didn't say I'm worried.
Okay.
So then I don't want you addressing the objection. I need to make sure you're not imputing emotions or feelings. If they were expressed or you observe them, you can describe that, but let's stay away from this witness characterizing something without you laying the foundation.
Yes, sir. During, after your interview or during your interview even with Mr. Lewis, did he indicate he was reluctant to speak?
Yes, he made it clear. He stated that the only reason he was there is out of respect for the judge. He said that he was willing to take the battery charge, but he was only there, and I'm assuming he was talking about because
Objection, speculation.
Don't assume.
he stated that he was willing to take the battery charge, but the reason he was there is out of respect for the judge.
And when you showed him the photograph, was he hesitant to identify the individual in it?
Yes.
After making a statement, after his statement to you, can you describe to the jury what you observed, how he was acting?
At first, he wasn't gonna speak about anyone besides Mr. Blige. He made it clear he didn't, these are just my associates at first, and then these are my brothers. This is really, he didn't say this is really hard, but you can hear the hesitance and him taking time when it came down to getting the identity of the additional people that he walked inside the club with.
Okay, and during your interview with Mr. Lewis and Judge Teskey present, was there conversation about Mr. Lewis getting out of Atlanta?
Yes.
And was this an offer that Judge Teskey provided to Mr. Lewis?
I recall them speaking about leaving Atlanta, which is, I took it as the judge is just encouraging him to go outside of Atlanta, since Atlanta apparently is a place where you have to carry your guns if you're a young Black person. And the judge did rebut with leaving Atlanta, but I don't know anything more as far as what was offered to him of it.
Okay. The friendly IT person, let me just.
Oh, hey, thank you. If you just slide back a little bit, we had touchscreen capability, something happened. Okay, good. Because we tried that a bunch of times and that didn't work. Glad it didn't work for you too. You tried that? Yeah. We even sprinkled holy water on it. It didn't work.
It's like $10,000 and it's not working now. I'm glad I remembered. That's what I asked the detective to do. I tried it during the break. And I was like, okay. It'd work for all the other witnesses. So just saying. Will it have to reconnect to Zoom since you turned it off, or it'll? Yeah, I will. What is it possibly doing? It takes that long to start up. It's a screen. Yeah, but you should be able to, I mean, see if the touchscreen part works now. We'll see. You're not sharing anything? No, nothing's being shared right now. Do you need something shared for it? I'll share something.
There you go, yeah.
Working? All right.
You share the pin at the bottom shows up.
Okay, excellent. So restarting it next time. Where are the power switch? Is that little button on the back? Okay, got it. I'll do that. Classic IT thing. Turn it off, turn it on. How much do we pay you for that? All right, you better do a whole lot of touchscreen with her now that we got that fixed.
Pressure's on now.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I left them. So,
What they all did is provided to Mr. Lewis.
thank you. Starting to read my mind, it's getting scary. After the interview with Mr. Lewis and Judge Teskey, can you tell the jurors kind of what you did next in your investigation?
So, excuse me, at this point, Judge Teskey did forward me all the information of the gentleman that was in the picture that we saw before, gave me Xavier Head, Quentin Williams, and Tracy Holly. I'm pretty sure I'm saying his first name wrong.
Okay.
And Tyree Blige. I first attempted to speak with Mr. Head. I made it to 3200 Bakersfield Road where I saw his mother. And I actually showed, at this time, actually, the video from the Buckhead Loft up front where you can see all of the people that walked in with Mr. Lewis, that was on a media blast. So when I showed the picture to Mr. Lewis in the interview, he had already seen this already on the news. So this stuff is it's not personal. It's out there. It's very public record at this point. I showed the same picture to Mr. Head's mother and attempted to ask her if she saw her son, and she looked at his shoes in the picture and said, because she doesn't recognize the shoes, she doesn't recognize her son. And I also, Miss Rhea, she obtained a lawyer. I attempted to reach out with her. And on that same day, the 26th, when I attempted to see Miss Mr. Head, I saw his mother. She retained a lawyer at that time. So that was the follow-up from the immediate follow-up from the interview.
Okay, and did you continue to receive additional video surveillance footage with the assistance of investigator T?
Yes, yes,
And did you continue to watch the surveillance footage as you received it?
I did, yes.
And did you receive any additional angles that were able to assist you in your investigation?
All of the other angles besides that one that I showed was my first, I had full access to by this time.
Okay, and were you able to see any additional events on the new footage?
Yes. Including everyone's arrival, how they arrived, what time they arrived, who they arrived with. I'm able to see them walk to the front door of the club and away from the front door of the club to and from their vehicles. And there's another incident just before Mr. Rivers got the handgun where I could see him take the gun from a female, which would be Miss Rhea. I can actually see Miss Rhea take the gun from her vehicle during this whole altercation. Javonta came, grabbed the gun from her, and then this was just before he used the gun, shooting it towards the right where I explained earlier what directions he shot.
Okay, and explain to the jurors how you're able to track them coming in or driving in and then going to the video, going into the club. I'd show you the footage, but we've seen it 1,000 times.
Oh, so it was just after midnight when Mr. William arrived. Now, William, he's the birthday boy this particular night. His birthday, I believe, is July 11th. So they're out celebrating his birthday, and you can see that he, Mr. Head, a couple other friends, Mr. Williams, they walk in together at the club a little bit after midnight. And actually at the same time was the same crew with the victim and his friends. They all actually walk in at about the same time inside the club. And then it was just after 2:00 a.m. And when I say how you can track on the video, you can see them park. You can see one park before the other. They waited together for the other vehicle to arrive, and then they walked in together. And again, they is Mr. Lewis, Mr. Head, Mr. Quentin Williams, and everyone you saw in the picture, the Nick, and later came Mr. Blige. But before I get to Mr. Blige's timeline, you can see them walk in together. And then it was a little bit before 2 a.m. when Mr. Blige got there. He wasn't there long at all. And by the time he was there was actually nobody in the parking lot. He parked his black sedan. You can see him get out of the vehicle, and you can see him walk from his vehicle to in front of the club. And then at that very time that you can see him approach the club, you can switch clips to the actual club scene, and it picks up at the same time as I can see from the last clip. And again, he's all by himself. There's nobody else around. He walks in by himself. And then he actually walks out before everybody else, but then also back in.
Okay, and now, when you say you're able to track Mr. Blige walking in, is this in State's Exhibit 139, what you're referring to as walking into the club by himself?
That's it, yeah, just
Okay.
before 2:00.
And you said you see him walk out and then back in?
Correct.
Okay. Now, are you able to, through the video surveillance, see the parties leave, see Mr. Blige leave, see Mr. Head leave, and their friends?
Yes, you can see them leave from the footage.
Okay, and can you track them to their vehicles?
Yes.
Okay, now I want to ask you,
It sounded like a silly question, but how are you able to track
Simply by watching. You can tell where they park from when they park upon their arrival. So they're walking in that very same vehicle, that same direction of the vehicle to the same vehicle. And you're just following. You see them go to that vehicle where they parked before they walked inside the club.
Now, Detective Barry, in this clip in State's Exhibit 133 at 12:12 a.m., can you tell the jurors, let me move this. Who is walking out of the club right now?
This is Head and Tracian, if I'm saying his first name, Mr. Holly.
Okay, and so Head and Trayson, they leave first.
Correct. And just as we're able to track them walking outside of this clip, you can pick up from another clip and you see them tracking to go to their vehicles.
In this clip in State's Exhibit 133, can you see, or 133, can you see Head and Tresson walking towards their vehicles?
Yes, I can. Right now, they're passing to Kayla's vehicle. That flash that you just saw on this, I believe, would be Tyree Blige's vehicle.
Oh. If you'll tell me when to stop, so when you see the flash.
Sure. Now, you mean the flash that I saw from Tyree's vehicle?
Yes.
You would have had to rewound it. He's in his vehicle now. He had hit the button to basically unlock the door.
Okay. I'm gonna get a little back. Before we get to the flash, will you circle where Tyree Blige's vehicle is?
I'm gonna try.
Okay. Carefully, you can erase the dot by the circle just by hitting the
There's
tapping the
a
screen.
This
little
right?
arrow that is like
Boom.
a loop circle. That should make it go away. Great. You're doing well.
Thank you, sir. That's the flash right there.
Do you see Mr. Blige walking towards his vehicle?
Yes, he's entering his car now, and Mr. Holly is walking away from Mr. Head's vehicle. Where Mr. Head, we saw him get inside that vehicle that we see the taillights on now.
Okay. And In this clip from State's Exhibit 133, do you see Mr. Blige walk out?
That's him walking out right there with his zipper is now zipped all the way up.
And that's
Right,
at
with
what
the white
time?
shoes. This is at 2:12 a.m. at the 57th second.
And then soon thereafter, do you see Mr. Lewis and Miss Ashley, Mr. Williams walk out?
This is them right here walking out right behind me. Well, that's Mr. Lewis. This is Ashley.
And that's at what time?
2:13 a.m. at the 13th second.
Okay. Now, after you're able to view all the video surveillance, can you tell the jurors how you continued or went about the rest of your investigation?
Yes. So again, after getting the identification of each of these suspects from the judge with the help of Mr. Lewis, I was able to get their information. I attempted to reach out with each of them. Mr. Head, I couldn't get in touch with him. Mr. Williams, Quentin Williams, I did speak with his mom. His mom assured me that he would call me to speak with me, but never heard from him. And then Mr. Blige obtained an attorney. From that point, I went on and took out arrest warrants for the murder of Solomon Smith it was Javonte Rivers, considering he was shooting in the direction of where the victim was. And you can't tell which bullet actually hit the victim. But at that time, I did a murder warrants for Javonte Rivers, Tyree Blige, and Xavier Head, with additional charges of tampering with evidence with Tyree and Quentin Williams. If you continue looking at the surveillance footage after the shooting, and vehicles besides Mr. Blige fled, including the victim going to the hospital, you can see two individuals attempt to pick up shell casings that were left on scene. That's where the charges of tampering came to Mr. Blige and Quentin Williams.
Now, do you see Mr. Williams at 222:36 in State's Exhibit 133?
Yeah, I can see him. He's the one still with the white t-shirt talking to the guy, Nick.
And let me just back up. Is there anything else about his attire or clothing that identifies that it's Mr. Williams?
Yeah.
Can you describe his pants?
From the close-up that we saw earlier, it's those black pants that has white right there, seemingly at the kneecap, with the white t-shirt, distinct hair with dreads on top.
Do you see the white knee pads, I guess is what they're called?
That's right, yeah, very distinctive.
And is where Mr. Williams just was in State's Exhibit 133 in the vicinity or area of where the shooting occurred?
Yes.
At this time, Detective Barry, is Mr. Blige Is his vehicle still on scene?
He's still there at this time.
Can you circle for the jurors? Well, let me show you a video. And the clip that you're watching now, can you see Mr. Blige's vehicle reversing or backing up?
Yes.
No, it's paused. No wonder. And is the vehicle that's in the middle of the back of your screen, is that the vehicle that Mr. Blige entered into?
Correct. He moves his vehicle just parked to another side of the parking lot.
And where his vehicle is turning right, is there an exit that way?
There's no exit that way.
Now, in this video clip, do you see Mr. Williams go for a second round or walk around the same area of where the crime scene had occurred for a second
Yes.
time?
Yes, he's still walking around there. He's picking up something there.
Now, in the very back of your screen, do you see the flashing lights? You go to the very back behind in this area that's closest to the fence.
Yeah, I saw.
Is that the area that Mr. Blige parks his vehicle?
Yes.
And in this clip, can you see where Mr. Williams is walking towards Mr. Blige's vehicle?
Yes.
And does Mr. Blige's vehicle leave the area of where he had parked in the back of the parking lot?
Yeah, parked in the same spot that he originated.
And I'm not sharing the screen. In this clip, do you see Mr. Blige's vehicle pulling into the same spot?
Yes.
And what does he do after he pulls into the same spot?
He gets out the vehicle. He joins Mr. Williams with picking up shell casings. This is Mr. Williams jogging from the parking spot he just came from.
Whose car is Mr. Williams running towards? The orange vehicle.
That's Nick's car.
Now, in this on the screen, who is walking around in front of Mr. Blige's vehicle?
In front of it, I can't see anyone in front of.
Let me zoom in for you. Do you see a person in a white shirt walking in front of Mr. Blige's vehicle?
I see Mr. Blige behind his vehicle picking up shell casings. Is there?
You see the person in the middle of the screen?
Yes.
What color shirt does he have on?
He has a white shirt on.
What color shoes?
He has white shoes on.
And does it appear that there's something over his head?
Yeah, the jacket that he had on all evening before he's now picking up shell casings.
When you say he, who are you referring to?
Mr. Blige.
Does Mr. Blige then leave the parking lot of the Buckhead Loft?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you said that you took out warrants for Javonte Rivers.
Yes.
Now, based on your viewing of the video surveillance and speaking with the witnesses, based on your observations, did Mr. Rivers fire after he was fired upon?
Yes.
Did Mr. Rivers lie to you?
Initially.
Were you also able to, during your investigation, speak with the manager as well as employees of the Buckhead Loft?
Yes.
And were you able to speak to Miss Tiffany Feliciano?
Yes.
And did Miss Feliciano look at was she able to observe the media blast or the photographs that you had shown?
Yeah, I sent all that to the full staff that worked that night. So yes, sir.
And was she able to provide you any information about individuals inside of the club that night?
Yes, she described Mr. Blige had walked in late to the same section of Mr. Lewis. He ordered a bottle of Hennessy and he left before partaking and then paid for it.
Did you make any attempts to speak with Quentin Williams?
Yes.
And were you able to talk to him?
No.
Now, later on in your investigation, in December of 2019, at that point, had you turned your case file or the case over to the district attorney's office?
Yes.
At that time, did Ms. Ashley contact you?
Yes.
And as a result of her contacting you, did you meet her somewhere?
Yes.
And during that meeting in December, did she describe to you or explain to you her observations of what occurred that night?
Yes, the purpose of her reaching out to me is I believe there was just additional incidents between her and her boyfriend, Mr. Lewis. and being fed up. I think she needed some more assistance as far as like a domestic violence situation that was going on between the two of them. I, of course, asked about the night in question at the Buckhead Loft, and ultimately she said that she doesn't know much about it, but she does know that she met up with Nick in an orange vehicle, and she knew Mr. Blige as Ree, not Tyree, and referred to him as such in the interview, and said that they met up just after the incident, but she couldn't give me any more details about the homicide that night.
Was she able to provide to you, or describe to you the vehicle that, Bree or Tyree Blige was in that night?
I know for sure that she mentioned the orange car. I can't remember if she described Mr. Blige's vehicle.
All right, we're looking at a copy of your lead supplement help.
Yes.
Refresh your recollection.
Thank you.
After you've reviewed it, just look up.
Okay, I'm ready.
And after reviewing your lead supplement that helped refresh your recollection as to whether Ms. Ashley was able to provide you with a description of the vehicle that Tyree Blige was in that night.
Yes, she described it to be black.
Your Honor, this time I state has no further questions.
All right. Ms. Fagan?
Thank you. Good morning, Detective Barry. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing well. So first I want to discuss the actual incident, okay? So Tyree was there for less than 30 minutes, correct?
Yeah.
And you see him come, right?
Yes.
And you see him go
Yes.
and come back.
Yes.
And then finally he goes to leave.
Yes.
And for each time he comes in and out of the club, he's always alone, right?
Yes.
Now, when the group left with William Lewis, when you saw William Lewis come out of the club, you see him hit someone. Did you see that?
You can look at it. It didn't.
Okay.
You said
Like-
William, Mr. Lewis. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yes.
so when William Lewis comes out, he stumbles and he hits somebody in the shoulder.
Is someone his girlfriend?
No, I'm talking about just outside the club door.
Yeah, can we look at it so I can see what you're speaking?
That's fine. We'll do that after lunch.
Oh, that's fine.
Let's get to a couple of important parts first. You didn't initially then you see him hit Asia Ashley, right?
Yes.
And you didn't initially put a warrant out for William Lewis, right?
For that, no.
Right. You wanted to talk to him first.
I had no intent to actually put warrants out for that, actually.
You were never going to put a warrant out for William Lewis for slamming his girlfriend?
My intent was to actually to get to the bottom of the homicide. It wasn't my intent to do that.
Okay. Now, all right, well, moving further, then on the video, you see after the situation happens with William Lewis and his girlfriend, Solo and Javante confront them about damage to the car, right?
Yes.
And then Jakayla diffuses the situation and has the boys walk back to the club, right?
That's not what I see on the surveillance.
Okay. Well, okay. Now you have one angle that's coming from the alleyway, correct?
Yes. Is that
And-
that first shot, like the angle that I first retrieved?
I'm not sure in what order you retrieved them, but you do have an angle, correct?
Yes.
That comes from the alleyway. Correct?
I can confirm after I see it, but after shown, yes, I've seen it.
Okay.
Yes.
Hold on, I have to share it for everyone. Sorry. Okay. Now,
Is this what you're calling the alleyway, Miss Fagan?
yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Now, let's zoom it. Oh, can't zoom it up. Okay, so you see Solo, Javante, and Jacayla walk away, correct?
Which,
You want me to replay?
yes, please. And what, is there a timestamp on this one?
Well, we're at 2:15.
I see it. Okay.
Okay. Zoom in. Now, everyone's still by Jacayla's car, right?
Yes.
And now you see William Lewis walking up, right?
Yes.
With his crew, correct?
Yes.
Now, that's Solo walking away right now, right?
Yes.
Javante's still back at the car, correct?
Yes.
With his sister Jacayla, right?
Correct.
And now Jacayla's pushing them all back to the club, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Solo's approaching. Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, so Jacayla, Javante, Solo walk away after they discuss the damages, right?
Yes.
Now, after the damage discussion and when they walk away, that's when Asia's trying to pull out, right?
Correct.
And when Asia tries to pull out, that's when she almost hits Rhea's truck, right?
Yes.
And in the video, that's when you see Helen punch the window, right?
Yes.
And then William Lewis comes to save Asia from those girls, right?
That's correct.
He pushes Rhea Thompson out the way, right?
Yes.
Pushes Helen Abraham out the way, right?
Yes.
And Helen runs to the truck and grabs that firearm,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when Helen grabbed that firearm, you watch her walk back to the commotion with the gun in the air, right?
I saw it in her hand.
Okay. Do you want to see the video?
Yes.
All right. So at 2:16:06, she has the gun in her hand.
So is that a question or are you testifying?
It's 2:16:06 on the video. Do you see Helen's gun in her hand? Here, I will zoom in. Do you need me to back up?
I don't recall her being there with the gun.
Okay, well,
If we can play it out, you can see
now, you also talked to Helen Abraham, correct?
at some point, yeah.
Right, so you met her at Piedmont, right?
Mhm.
And then you met her at $3 Cafe, right?
Right.
And at $3 Cafe, you confront her for having that gun in her hand, right?
I did.
Because you were wondering where the gun came from, right? And you could tell that she knew where that gun was because she ran to the car.
Straight.
Overruled.
You actually told Helen that Helen knew where the gun was because of the way she ran to the car.
She got it pretty quick, yeah.
Okay, then you confronted Rhea about where the gun was, right?
Yes.
And Rhea said it was my mom's gun, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Here's that.
We can move forward.
We'll move forward. You don't need to answer that question.
Did you then do any research to confirm if Rhea's mother owned a gun?
No.
You told Rhea you didn't want to charge her with obstruction, right?
Correct.
And that it was very important she tell you where that gun was, right?
Correct.
But she never told you where that gun was.
She never did. Her mother never contacted me back. I tried to, the only research I did was attempt to speak with her mother and never got anything from her.
Okay. Now, do you agree, though, that Helen had the gun in her hand?
Yes.
Okay. And will you agree that Helen then puts the gun to William Lewis's head? I'll show you the video.
Okay.
So you see Helen with the gun currently, correct?
I'm sorry. Could you, yes.
You
Yes.
see that gun pointed, right?
I see.
And then she's gonna walk behind William Lewis with the gun to his head, correct?
I see that.
Okay, now I want you to stay focused right here because ultimately you watched Javante run to Helen and grab that gun, right? In the
Yes.
corner?
Yes.
So-
That's what I saw.
Okay, let's get there. So as Helen has that gun to William Lewis's head, Solo just came in and punched William Lewis in the face, right?
Yes,
Now Javante just got in the fight, didn't he?
yes,
Now Helen's getting out of the fight. Right?
correct,
Helen just gave the gun to Rhea.
correct.
Rhea's about to give the gun to Rivers.
Rivers, correct.
Now I want you to watch Rivers. I want to know, in your investigation, did you ever see Rivers as he chases Quentin Williams away with the gun? I want you to focus here and watch Javante Rivers chase Quentin Williams between those cars.
Okay,
So you're testifying, you can ask her what she says, you can say, do you see this? But you don't tell her, here's what you're gonna see, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Tell me if you see Javante Rivers run after Quentin. Javante has the gun, right?
he just grabbed it, yes.
Javante has the gun pointed at Quentin. Oops, sorry, I just started it over. Quentin Williams is the one with dreads, correct?
Yes,
And knee pads, white knee pads.
yes. If you could just point them out where they are right now, though.
Well, she can't because that's
I
testifying.
got you, I got you.
I can rewind if you
That's
need to
perfect.
see it again. Okay. Is this where you want to be?
Can we go back to where he takes the gun from
Yes.
Rhea?
Okay. Oops. Apologies. I'm actually just gonna let it play out.
That's fine.
All right. Helen just punched the window. Correct?
Yeah. Lewis is pushing him back.
Helen still has the gun. Correct.
Yes.
Now they're fighting.
Your Honor.
So please don't narrate, you can ask questions.
Yes, Judge. You see Javante with that gun to Quentin Williams?
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right.
So that was just at the end of the very clip? Is that,
You know how there are two clips?
I'm just making sure.
That was the end of the first. Now going to the beginning of the second.
Mhm.
So you did just see though, Javante Rivers have that gun and chasing Quentin Williams, right?
I saw him, yes,
And right now, no gunfire's happened yet, right?
correct.
And I would like you to watch the body language of Javante Rivers for my next question. Quentin Williams is running away, correct?
He ran off.
Now, you just saw shots fired, correct? Okay. You would agree that no one brought a gun into this situation until Helen brought
Agreed.
a gun. And then Javante grabbed the gun, right?
Same gun, yes,
Then Javante held that gun to Quentin Lewis, right?
yes.
And that's when shots fired, correct?
Afterwards, after some seconds, after the person who you pointed out that Mr. Rivers was chasing, he was gone off scene. I can't see him anymore, but we can still see Rivers just standing right there amongst the first shooters.
Okay, I want you to look at Javante's body language.
Okay.
Now Javante was the one in the white shirt.
Correct. Like right now, he's behind. We can't see him. Okay, I'm just making sure we're looking at the same guy.
And
Yes.
prior to him getting behind that pillar though, you could see his arms moving, right? You want me to go back?
Yeah, for some reason I thought his hands were down.
Okay. And then shots were fired, right? Did
Yeah.
Javante tell you what he was saying then?
No, I can't recall what he was
Okay.
saying.
Javante never told you about holding a gun to Quentin Williams either, right?
He didn't.
And never in your report did you ever mention that you saw Javante Rivers first hold that gun to Quentin Williams, right?
Correct.
It's today the first time you ever saw that?
That he's shooting?
That you noticed Javante Rivers chase Quentin Williams with that gun?
Well, sure. When you had the narrative saying that he's chasing someone, yeah, I see him running around shooting in directions when he's getting shot at from behind and not noticing it. But yeah, this is my first time getting the narrative that he's chasing somebody. Yes.
Right. And him chasing though is before any
Shots are fired.
Now, when there was just a fist fight.
We're gonna pause there just because that's a natural break and it is afternoon when we need to take our lunch break. So, ladies and gentlemen, we try to keep lunch to about an hour. That still works. We'll be back by 1:05 to the jury room. Do what you want during the hour other than talk about this case or conduct any outside research. Sarge will get you back into the jury room. You can go about your business and we will see you at 1:05. Thank you. I need to end the Zoom call so we can have this conversation. I assume I can start it back up again. We'll find out. I can't leave this stuff on in here.